Jake had always believed in keeping to himself. A quiet, tough soldier who had seen too much of the world, he liked his routine patrolling, checking in with his unit and staying out of trouble. But that night, everything changed. It was irregular. Evening when Jake was walking back home, passing through a narrow alley behind the old warehouse district. The weather was cool, and a light breeze rustled through the leaves. The sky was covered in thick clouds, casting an eerie darkness over the streets. Something felt off. Jake couldn't quite put his finger on it, but his instincts told him that tonight wasn't like any other. As he walked past the alley, a faint whimper reached his ears. Jake froze. He squinted into the dim light, trying to make out the source of the sound. He heard it again, soft, almost like a child in pain. Against his better judgment, Jake walked toward the sound, his hand instinctively resting on the sidearm holstered at his waist. He rounded the corner and stopped in his tracks. There, crouched behind an old dumpster, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her skin was a pale violet shade, glowing faintly under the weak light. Her long silver blue hair fell in tangled waves around her face, and her eyes, large and shining, glowed with an unnatural light. The girl looked up at him, startled, her eyes wide with fear. Her clothes were torn and covered in dirt, as though she had been running for days. Jake took a cautious step forward. He could see the fear in her eyes, fear that wasn't normal for a human child. This wasn't just any girl. "Hey, are you okay?" Jake's voice was steady, though a part of him felt the sharp tug of unease. The girl flinched but didn't run. Instead, she stared at him for a long moment, her mouth opening as if she was about to say something but couldn't find the words. "Who? Are you?" Jake repeated, his eyes scanning her closely. There was something unnatural about her, something that sent a chill down his spine. The girl seemed out of place, too fragile, yet somehow powerful. I need your help." Girl finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Please. I need somewhere safe." Jake paused. Safe? From what? Who could want to harm a little girl? He glanced around the alley, but saw no sign of anyone else. Just the wind rustling the trash and a strange silence that felt heavier than it. He crouched down slowly, trying not to scare her more. "You're safe here, but I need to know who you are. Where are your parents?" The girl swallowed hard, her eyes welling up with tears. "They're gone. They're all gone," she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm the last one. They're hunting me, please. I don't know where to go. Please help me." Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. There was something far more serious going on here than a lost child. Her fear was palpable, and something about her words didn't sit right with him. "Who's hunting you?" She hesitated, as if debating whether or not to trust him. I'm not from here," she said, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "I'm not from Earth." The words hit Jake like a cold slap. His heart skipped a beat, and he straightened, suddenly unsure of what he was hearing. "Not from Earth? What do you mean?" But before she could answer, a loud thud echoed down the alley. The girl froze, her glowing eyes widening in panic. She scrambled to her feet, backing into the corner of the alley as if trying to make herself invisible. Jake's instincts kicked in. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him. What the hell was that? He muttered under his breath. Another thud, closer this time. It was coming from the other side of the alley, and it was clear that someone or something was out there. Jake's hand moved to his weapon, but he didn't draw it yet. He had to think. The girl's breath came faster, and she shook her head. "They're here. They'll find us." Her voice trembled, but she wasn't running. Instead, she was looking around as though sensing something. He COULDN, single quotes 2 dots. Suddenly, the alley grew cold. A strange, tingling sensation filled the air. Jake's skin prickled, and for the first time, he felt the undeniable presence of someone coming toward them. Then, A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a man, dressed in dark, military-style gear, but something about him wasn't right. His eyes glowed faintly, just like the girl's, and his movements were eerily smooth, almost mechanical. He stepped toward them, his gaze locking on the girl. "You shouldn't have run, little one," he said, his voice cold and unnerving. "It's too late." Jake's grip on the girl tightened, his other hand reaching for his weapon. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp. The man didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand, and blue energy began to swirl around his fingers. Jake didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't about to stand by and let this happen. His mind raced, trying to figure out what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. The girl looked up at Jake, her eyes wide with fear. "You have to protect me," she whispered. "Please." Jake didn't hesitate. With no time to think, he pulled her to her feet and bolted, dragging her behind him. He didn't know who these people were, but there was no way he was going to let them take her. As they ran through the dark alleyways, Jake's mind raced with questions. What was she? Why did they want her? But one thing was clear. Jake had just stepped into a fight much bigger than he ever expected, and he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Asterisk. The night was darker than Jake had ever remembered. Even the streetlights seemed to flicker nervously as he dragged the alien girl behind him through the twisting alleyways. He didn't know who the man chasing them was, or where they were going. But something told him that he wasn't about to get any answers, at least not yet. Jake kept glancing over his shoulder, each footstep echoing in the empty street. The girl's hand was clenched tightly in his, her small fingers surprisingly cold. She was trembling not from the cold, but from fear, and Jake couldn't blame her. Something was very wrong here, and it wasn't just the strange people after them. They finally reached Jake's apartment complex, a grimy building on the edge of the city, but it would have to do. No one would expect them here. He pushed open the rusted front door, leading the girl inside. She hesitated for a moment before stepping through. Her eyes darted nervously, scanning the room like she was expecting someone or something inside. Jake locked the door behind them, then exhaled deeply. It was just them now. Just them and the endless questions that burned in his mind. "Stay here," he said softly, but his voice was gruff with frustration. "I'll get you something to drink." The girl didn't respond. She was already sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her eyes never left the door, and Jake could feel her anxiety filling the room. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and walked back toward her, setting it down on the table in front of her. "You want something to eat?" he asked, though. It felt like an odd question. She didn't look like she'd eaten in days, but her gaze remained distant, unfocused. "I don't need food," she whispered, her voice shaky. She didn't meet his eyes. Jake watched her for a moment before speaking. "Who are you, really?" he asked, sitting across from her. His voice was firm, but not unkind. "And why are they after you?" The girl's eyes filled with a sudden sadness, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm Lira. I'm the last of my kind." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that Jake could feel in his chest. "The last of your kind?" Jake repeated. The words sounded like something from a sci-fi movie, and he almost couldn't believe them, but the girl's eyes, those glowing, alien eyes, told him it was all too real. Lira nodded, but her gaze never left the floor. "My people were once peaceful, but the others, they came. They attacked us. They destroyed everything. They want me too. They want me dead." Jake was silent, his mind trying to process what he had just heard. He'd seen his share of violence and war, but this was something entirely different. He didn't know what to say, but he had to ask. "Who are they? Who's hunting you?" Lira's eyes finally met his. "I don't know exactly. I just know they've been hunting my kind for years. Humans, you've seen them, haven't you? The ones who don't belong to this world." Jake frowned. The ones I saw earlier? He thought about the strange man he'd seen chasing them, with his glowing eyes and his eerie calm. It didn't make sense. Was he one of those hunters? They're called the Vekari, Lira said softly. They come from another world, and they hunt down anyone who isn't human. They've been after me for a long time. I was one of the few who managed to escape. Jake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. The pieces weren't adding up. But why me? Why did you come to me for help? Lira swallowed hard, clearly reluctant to share more. She glanced at the door, as though she expected someone to burst through any moment. Because ... I can't do this alone. I've been running for so long, but I can't fight them. They have powers I don't understand. And I don't know what they want with me, but I know they won't stop until they find me ... And they'll destroy everything in their path to do it. Jake rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of the chaos. Vekari, aliens. A girl, no, not just a girl, but a being from another world. He should have turned her in. He should have called someone, reported it. But there was something about her, something in her eyes that made him believe her. And when she said she couldn't do it alone, he knew that he was already in this deeper than he could ever walk away from. You're not alone anymore, Jake said finally, his voice low but resolute. I don't know what kind of mess you've dragged me into, but I'll help you. I don't know what they're after, but we'll figure this out together. Lira's eyes softened just a little. She didn't smile, she couldn't smile. Not in her state, but there was a glimmer of something. Hope. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means to me. Jake stood up, pacing in the small living room, his thoughts racing. All right. First things first, we need to figure out what we're dealing with. We can't stay here for long. If they find us, I'll protect you, Lira interrupted softly, standing up now. Her hands glowed faintly, the light shimmering around her fingers. I can do more than you think, but I need your help. Jake stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. She wasn't lying. He could see it in her eyes. There was more to her. Then he realized more power, more danger. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt like he had no idea what was coming next. But whatever it was, he was going to face it with her. No turning back now. Jake's mind raced as he stared at Lira, her words, the things she had shared about her people, the Vekari, and their relentless pursuit, all seemed too overwhelming to grasp. He was used to danger, to dealing with threats head-on, but this was something different, something ... alien. The silence between them was thick, like the air before a storm. Lira's glowing eyes, once filled with fear, were now determined. She was no longer just the scared little girl Jake had found hiding behind the dumpster. She was a survivor, a warrior, perhaps, in a way he couldn't yet understand. But there was no time for contemplation. The faint hum of approaching vehicles, too loud to be casual traffic, reached Jake's ears. His instincts screamed. They were coming for her. Lira, Jake said, his voice urgent. We need to go. Now, she nodded without hesitation. Her glowing hands flickering with energy as she moved swiftly toward the door. Jake grabbed his jacket, slinging it over his shoulder, and checked the hallway through a crack in the door. There was no sign of them yet, but he didn't need to wait to know they were close. Jake motioned for Lira to follow him quietly. Stay low, he ordered. The girl didn't need to be told twice. She moved like a shadow, light on her feet. Her every step graceful but swift. She was already far ahead of him as they crept through the dark, empty hallways of the apartment complex. He followed close behind, eyes scanning every corner, every open window. There was a tension in the air now, a palpable sense of danger that Jake couldn't ignore. When they reached the back door of the building, Lira turned to Jake. Her face was a mask of fear, but her eyes burned with a fierce determination. They'll be here any minute, she whispered. If we don't hurry, we're trapped. Jake gritted his teeth. He didn't know where to go. The only exit was the alleyway behind the building, but it was narrow and exposed. He couldn't afford to get caught out in the open. "Do you know anywhere we can hide?" Jake asked, already. Looking around for an escape route, Lyra's eyes flickered, a faint pulse of light radiating from them as she scanned their surroundings. Her gaze settled on an old rusted door next to the building, a forgotten maintenance entrance. "Through there," she said, nodding toward the door. "It leads to the tunnels." "Tunnels?" Jake echoed, raising an eyebrow. "What tunnels?" "The ones under the city." "They're hidden," Lira explained, her voice more urgent now. "I can take us to them. They'll never find us down there." Jake didn't waste a second. He grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. The rusty hinges screamed in protest, but they were already running before the sound could draw any attention. The cold air from the underground hit them as they descended into the darkness, and the door shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them away from the world above. They were underground now, deep within the city's forgotten network of tunnels. The air was thick and damp, the faint echo of their footsteps the only sound as they moved further into the labyrinth of underground passages. Jake tried to steady his breath. This was insane. He had just helped an alien girl escape from an army of hunters, and now they were running through tunnels beneath a city that hadn't seen daylight in decades. He had no idea where he was going, or what they would find down here. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the gravity of what he had gotten himself into. "Lira," Jake asked, trying to catch his breath, "where do these tunnels lead, do you know?" "They go all over the city," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with worry. "Some lead out into the outskirts, others are abandoned sections. We'll be safe down here for a while." Jake nodded, though his thoughts were far from reassured. Safe for a while. He knew that wouldn't last long. The Vekari were relentless. They would never stop hunting her. Suddenly, Lira stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she listened to the distant sounds echoing through the tunnels. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice low and tense. "We need to move faster." Jake didn't have time to ask questions. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her forward, deeper into the dark tunnels. His heart raced as they turned corners and navigated through narrow corridors. The light from Lyra's glowing hands barely illuminated their path, casting strange shadows on the walls. Jake's mind raced, running through every escape plan he had ever come up with. None of them felt real now. They were being hunted by aliens. They were both in over their heads. At the end of the hallway, a faint light flickered. Jake couldn't tell if it was an exit or just another dead end. But they were running out of time. "There's a safe house up ahead," Lira said, her voice a whisper. "We just need to get there." Before Jake could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The air grew colder, and a faint hum filled the tunnel. Lyra's body tensed, her glowing hands raising instinctively. "They're here," she said quietly, her voice tight with fear. "We're not alone anymore." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He spun around, his hand reaching for his gun. But the dark tunnel only offered him silence and shadows. Who was here? Was it the Vekari? Or someone else? He didn't have time to think. With a deep breath, he nodded at Lira. "Let's go. We can't stay here." And they ran. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing them, whole as the distant sounds of pursuit grew closer. Each step was a countdown. They had no idea how much time they had left. Asterisk. Jake's breath came in heavy gasps as he and Lira stumbled through the labyrinth of tunnels. The narrow passages seemed endless, their walls damp with age, the air thick with the scent of rust and decay. But even as they pushed forward, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was going on. Something beyond just this girl and her desperate flight. As they reached a quiet, eerie corner of the underground system, Lira suddenly stopped. Jake, a few steps behind, nearly collided with her. Her body was tense, her eyes wide, scanning the shadows around them. "What's wrong?" Jake whispered, lowering his voice. Lyra's glowing eyes darted from side to side, and she swallowed hard. "They're closer than we think," she said, voice trembling. "They know we're here." Jake's instincts flared. He looked down both tunnels, trying to hear anything, but the world around them was silent. It wasn't a good kind of quiet. It felt like the calm before a storm. "You said we'd be safe down here," Jake muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "I didn't say it was forever," Lyra replied, her tone sharp, then softened. "But we're not safe here yet." She looked down at her hands, the soft pulsing glow illuminating the dark corridor. "I need to tell you something about me. About why they're after me." Jake raised an eyebrow, concerned. "You're gonna tell me now? You've been pretty quiet about it." Lyra hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line as though the words she needed to say weighed her down. "I told you. I'm the last of my kind. My people, the Corians, once lived on a planet far from here. We weren't like you." She paused, her voice low and uncertain. "We were peaceful, gentle, just different." Jake waited, but something in her voice made him realize there was more to her story than just running from danger. "Go on," he urged, his curiosity growing. Lyra's eyes flickered to the side. "Our world, Coria. It was a beautiful place. We lived for millennia, untouched by the wars that ravaged the rest of the universe. Our powers were different than anything you've ever seen, Jake. We could create, manipulate energy, bend the forces of nature to our will. We didn't fight wars, we avoided them." She looked down at her hands, her fingers curling into fists. The glow around her fingers dimmed, then flared back to life. But then the Vekari came. They don't care about peace. They care about power, and they wanted ours. Jake stood in stunned silence. Bending nature to their will? That was the kind of thing that belonged in a fantasy novel, not real life. He thought back to the moment they had first met, how she had created that faint glowing shield around them to protect from their pursuers. "How did they find you?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile truth Lyra had just revealed. Lyra's voice cracked. "The Vekari have the technology to track us through our energy. It's how they found us, how they knew to follow me. It's how they hunted us down." She took a deep breath, looking directly into Jake's eyes. "And the worst part? They didn't come to conquer us. They came to exterminate us. Our kind is too dangerous. They're afraid of us, our powers, our abilities. They don't want anyone else to have them." Jake frowned, trying to wrap his mind around her words. It didn't make sense. People didn't go to war over fear of power. They went to war for control. But Lyra's words felt real. There was sincerity, raw emotion in them. "So they killed all of your people?" he asked, his voice low, knowing the answer before she spoke. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, fighting back tears. "Most of them. Yes, they wiped us out, the few of us who survived. We scattered, we went to different planets, tried to hide. But no matter where we go, they find us." Jake's heart tightened. The desperation in her voice was enough to make him want to do more than just help. He wanted to fight. He knew he had no idea what kind of enemy he was dealing with. But one thing was clear. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. "What happened to the others?" Jake asked, his voice quiet. "The ones who escaped? Did any of them survive?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "I don't know. The last I saw of them, they were fighting. And then nothing, just empty skies." Her gaze softened for a moment. "I was sent here to hide, to stay out of the fight. But they found me anyway." Jake stepped closer, his hands resting on his hips. "And now they're after you again. After all this time." Lyra nodded, her eyes darkening. Yes, I thought I was safe here on Earth, but they've been tracking me for months, ever since I arrived, she swallowed. And they're getting closer. They've already sent the hunters. They don't make mistakes. If they find me, they'll wipe out everything, including you. Jake stiffened, his blood running cold. Me? She met his gaze with a heavy look of apology. I didn't want to drag you into this, Jake, but now it's too late. You're involved whether you want to be or not. You're the last person who can help me. Jake stood still for a long moment, trying to understand the weight of what she was saying. His life had just been turned upside down, and there was no going back. He was in this for the long haul now, whether he was ready or not. We're not running anymore, Lira, Jake said firmly. We're going to fight back. Whatever it takes. Lira's glowing eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of gratitude crossing her face. I don't know what to say. I never expected someone to help me like this. No one has ever believed in us, believed in me, like you do. Jake looked away, his jaw set. We'll figure this out, together. But even as he spoke, deep in the shadows of the tunnels, there was a noise of faint hum. It wasn't just the wind anymore. They were close. The Vekari were coming, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. The tunnels beneath the city were more silent now, the soft hum of their footsteps muffled by the stone and earth around them. Jake and Lira moved through the dark, the weight of her words still hanging between them. The fear, the desperation, the fact that they were up against something far beyond what he had ever imagined. It all threatened to overwhelm him. They had been running for hours, deeper into the labyrinth of forgotten underground paths. Lira's glow provided their only light, a faint and steady source of illumination. Every now and then, Jake would look at her, seeing how tightly she clutched her arms, how her eyes would dart around as if expecting something to jump out of the shadows at any moment. He could feel her tension, and in turn, it made his muscles tighten. She was still running, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. There was too much at stake here, too much he didn't know, too many unanswered questions. Suddenly, Lira stopped. Her eyes locked on something ahead, a dark spot in the distance, a place where even the dim glow of her powers seemed to struggle to reach. Jake caught up with her, noticing the way her body tensed, every muscle coiled, ready for something. What is it? Jake asked, his voice low, cautious. Lira didn't answer immediately. She simply stared at the darkness, her face unreadable. Her glowing hands clenched at her sides. We're not alone, she said softly. Jake scanned the tunnel, his instincts on high alert. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Who's there? His fingers brushed against his weapon, but he didn't draw it yet. He wasn't sure what they were facing, and he knew he had to be careful. A sound echoed from the distance, a soft but unmistakable footstep, followed by the clinking of metal. Then, a voice familiar cut through the silence. Jake? The voice was unmistakable. Mark. Jake's heart sank. It was his old friend Mark, a fellow soldier who had once been his trusted partner. But there was something about the voice that made Jake pause. The hesitation. The uncertainty. Mark never hesitated. Lira's eyes flickered, her gaze flicking between Jake and the distant sound of Mark's voice. She whispered urgently, Jake, no, don't trust him. He's one of them. He's with the Vekari. Jake shook his head, confusion mixing with suspicion. Mark a traitor? It didn't make sense. But then again, nothing about this situation made sense anymore. He had been thrown into a world where aliens existed, and now he was running for his life with a girl who wasn't even human. Why not? Why wouldn't Mark be involved? Jake, Mark called out again, his voice closer now, echoing through the dark tunnels. I know you're down there. Come on, let's talk. You don't need to be in this mess. Just let me help you. Lira's grip tightened on Jake's arm. Don't listen to him, she hissed. They've been tracking me for months. They'll use him to get to you, to get to me. He's been working for the Vekari this whole time. Jake's mind reeled. Could it be true? He had known Mark for years, trusted him with his life. But Lira's words, they echoed in his head, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The sound of footsteps grew louder. Jake turned to Lira, his face hardening. "You're sure about this?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear but resolute. "I know what I feel, and I feel it. He's one of them." Before Jake could answer, a figure emerged from the darkness. Mark stepped into the faint glow of Lira's light, his face worn and tired. But there was something about him now. His eyes lacked the warmth they used to have, replaced with a coldness that made Jake's stomach churn. "Mark ... Jake said cautiously, trying to mask the unease in his voice. "What the hell is going on?" Mark's eyes flickered to Lira for a moment, then back to Jake. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this, but I guess it's time." His voice was strangely calm, too calm. "Jake, you've gotten in way over your head. The Vekari are far beyond anything you can imagine, and this is bigger than both of us." Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. He took a step back, instinctively moving in front of Lira, shielding her with his body. "You've been working with them, haven't you, all this time?" Mark's face didn't change, but his eyes grew sharper, colder. "It's not what you think, Jake. I've been trying to protect you, to protect everyone. You don't understand the stakes here. Lira is dangerous, Jake. She is the one the Vekari are after. You've made yourself a target, and now you're caught in the middle of something you don't even know how to fight." Lira stepped forward, her glow intensifying as she squared off against Mark. "I'm not dangerous," she shouted, her voice echoing through the tunnel. "I never wanted this. You don't understand. They're hunting us all, my people, everyone, because of the power we hold. We didn't ask for this war." Mark's expression darkened. "You're wrong. Lira, the Vekari are right to hunt you. You're the last of your kind, and you're a threat to everything we've built. We can't let you live. If you don't come with me, I'll be forced to take you back alive or dead." Jake felt his blood run cold. His best friend was standing before him, not as a soldier he once trusted, but as someone who had betrayed everything he believed in. The betrayal stung deep, far more than he could have anticipated. "You've got it all wrong," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "I don't care who you're working for. I'm not letting you take her." A tense silence stretched between them. Mark's eyes narrowed, and his hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side. "I warned you," Mark said quietly. "You should have stayed out of this." In an instant, the tension shattered like glass. Mark reached for his weapon, and Jake's heart raced. He moved first, instinctively pulling Lira behind him, drawing his own gun. But the moment felt wrong. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about choosing a side in a war he didn't understand. Jake's mind raced. Was this the right decision? Should he trust Lira completely? Was Mark just another victim of the Vekari, or was he too far gone to be saved? The sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnel was like the ticking of a clock, counting down to the moment when everything would change. Jake's heart raced, his palms sweating against the cold, metal grip of his weapon. Mark, now a stranger, in his eyes, stood only a few feet away, his hand still poised over his sidearm. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, and Jake's mind spun with 1,000 questions. Could Mark still be saved? Was he truly working for the Vekari? And if so, what was his next move? Lira's voice broke the silence, her words laced with urgency. "Jake, we can't stay here. They're coming." Jake didn't take his eyes off Mark, who had begun to smile, though it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was calculated, cold. "You don't understand, Jake," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "The Vekari are beyond anything you've faced. They have armies, technology you can't even comprehend. If we don't stop them now, They'll destroy everything Earth, your people, and mine. I've tried to protect you. Tried to warn you. Jake's grip tightened on the gun. You've been protecting me by lying? By turning your back on everything we've fought for? He shook his head, the weight of betrayal crashing down on him. You made your choice, Mark, and I'm not going to let you drag me into it. A flicker of regret crossed Mark's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You're making a mistake. This isn't about Earth anymore. This is about survival. The Vekari won't stop until they have what they came for. His voice hardened, like steel. And they won't hesitate to destroy you both to get it. Lira stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter now, the edges of her form shimmering with the pulse of her energy. You don't have to do this, Mark, she said, her voice pleading. I never wanted this. I never wanted to be a weapon. But the Vekari are hunting me because of what we're capable of. We have no choice but to fight back. Mark's lips curled into a sneer. And you think fighting back will stop them? They are the storm, Lira. You're just a spark that'll be snuffed out. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen, suspended in a space between words and action. Jake's mind was spinning. He had been a soldier, trained to think quickly, to make decisions in the heat of battle. But this wasn't a typical fight. It wasn't just bullets and strategy. It was personal. The lines were blurred, and the stakes were unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Then, the distant hum from earlier returned closer this time. A faint buzzing, like the sound of something vast moving through the tunnels. The Vekari, Lira's eyes widened. They found us, she whispered, more to herself than to Jake or Mark. We're out of time. Jake didn't waste a second. Mark, get out of the way. We're leaving. But Mark didn't budge. You're too late, he said, his voice low. You'll never make it out alive. They're here already. The ground trembled. A flash of light cut through the darkness, and a blast of heat rushed past them, followed by the unmistakable sound of a Vekari ship descending into the tunnel system. The light was blinding, like the flash of an explosion. That hadn't yet happened. Jake instinctively pushed Lira back, shielding her as the shockwave hit. But the blast never came. Instead, the walls around them rumbled and cracked as Vekari soldiers descended into the tunnel from above, their figures silhouetted against the pulsing light dot. It was as though the tunnel had become a trap, a place they would never escape. Lira's hands shot out, and blue energy swirled around them, forming a protective barrier. The Vekari soldiers hesitated, momentarily stunned by the surge of power. But it wasn't enough. There were too many of them. And the Vekari were relentless. We can't hold them off forever, Lira said, her voice strained. The barrier flickered, and the strain was evident in her glowing eyes. We need to leave, now. But Jake wasn't ready to run, not yet. He couldn't just leave everything behind, not when they were so close. There's another way out, he said, a plan forming in his mind. He turned to Mark, his voice steady but filled with a hard edge. You want to be a part of this? Help us fight, or get out of the way. Because if you stay with them, you're not leaving this tunnel alive. Mark hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. But it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. You don't understand, Jake. I can't help you. I'm already too deep. They control everything. Lira looked at Mark one last time, her expression softening for a split second. You were once my friend, Mark, but if you're not willing to fight with us, then you've made your choice. Jake didn't have time to process Mark's next words. He was already moving. The moment of hesitation had passed. He grabbed Lira by the arm, pulling her with him as he ran toward the narrow side passage he'd spotted earlier. Behind them, the Vekari soldiers closed in. Go! Jake shouted. The last stand had begun. The walls shook again, this time with the heavy footsteps of the Vekari. The air in the tunnel became thick with fear and the smell of burning energy as Lira's power surged once more, giving them a few extra moments of precious time. But it wouldn't be enough. Not unless they fought back. Jake pushed forward with everything he had. He didn't know what awaited them outside, but he knew this. He wasn't going down without a fight. Neither was Lira. She had already lost everything. He wouldn't let her lose herself. Not on his watch. They ran into the unknown, ready for whatever the Vekari had planned. The battle for Earth had just begun. The air was thick with tension as Jake and Lira dashed through the crumbling tunnels, their footsteps a rhythmic pounding in the darkness. Behind them, the Vekari soldiers closed in, their eerie, synchronized movement making them seem more like a hunting pack than individuals. The light from Lira's hands flickered in time with the echo of their pursuers, casting shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly down the narrow passageways. Lira was breathing heavily, her energy clearly beginning to wane. Every step she took seemed to drain her, her powers flickering like a dying light bulb, but her resolve was ironclad. She wouldn't stop, not until they were out. Not until they had a chance. Jake's mind was racing. He knew the Vekari weren't just after Lira, they were after everything. She wasn't just the last of her kind. She was a symbol of something the Vekari couldn't afford to let live. If they succeeded in capturing her, they wouldn't just kill her. They would wipe out the last trace of a peaceful civilization that could potentially stand against their empire. But Jake was standing on a precipice, a line he couldn't cross. With every footstep, he had to choose between protecting the alien girl, who had somehow become his ally, or risking everything to stop the Vekari. Even if that meant using her power in ways she wasn't ready for. As they rounded a corner in the tunnel, the world above seemed to close in around them. The exit, the one that had seemed so far away just moments ago, was now visible, a faint glimmer of natural light at the far end of a narrow tunnel. The distant rumble of Vekari ships and alien technology felt like it was closing in on them. Jake could feel the weight of the choice ahead of them, and every second seemed like an eternity. "We're almost there," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm, though his chest tightened with urgency. He glanced at Lira. She was pale now, sweat beading on her forehead, and there was a distant look in her eyes, like she was already preparing herself for something worse. The Vekari weren't just after her. They wanted to use her powers, twist them to their will. The Vekari weren't going to give up easily. "Jake," Lira said, her voice faint, barely above a whisper, "there's something you need to understand. I'm not just running from them because of my people's past. It's not just about surviving anymore. If they capture me, if they break me, they'll use my powers to destroy entire planets. I'm a weapon. I don't want to be, but Jake slowed down for a moment, his heart dropping in his chest. He had known this was coming. He had known that there was more to this girl than just fear. But hearing it in her voice, seeing the truth in her eyes, it changed everything. "You're not a weapon, Lira," he said firmly, as if saying the words could stop the nightmare from unfolding. "You're just a person. A person who's been forced into this fight." He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "And I'll make sure you don't have to face this alone." Lira shook her head, her eyes filled with regret. "You don't understand. If I go back to them, if I give myself up, I can save you. I can save everyone. The Vekari won't destroy your world if I go willingly. They just want me. But if I fight ... Jake's chest tightened, and his hand fell away from her shoulder. He stopped walking, unwilling to go another step without truly understanding the choice that lay before them. "What are you saying?" Jake asked, his voice a little more strained now. "You want me to let them take you? After everything we've been through? After I've watched you fight for your life? You really think that's the answer?" Lira's voice wavered. "I don't want to die, Jake, but I don't want to see the world you love torn apart either. If they have me, if I give them what they want, I can prevent the destruction of everything. I can stop the Vekari from conquering Earth." Jake shook his head. his mind whirling with the weight of her words. He couldn't lose her. Not after everything they had been through, but the stakes had never been higher. If he chose wrong, if they fought and lost, the Vekari wouldn't just destroy Lira, they would destroy Earth, everything he knew. "You're not going anywhere," Jake said, his voice suddenly firm with a strength he hadn't known he had. "I won't let them use you as a weapon. Not now. Not ever. We're going to fight this together." The ground beneath them trembled. "The Vekari. We're closing in. We don't have much time, Jake." Lyra's eyes filled with an almost sorrowful understanding. But there was something new there too, a spark of determination. "The Vekari are here. And if they find us, they will wipe out everything. Earth, my kind, there's no second chance. For either of us." Jake turned toward the faint light at the end of the tunnel. They couldn't escape alone. He had made his choice. There was no going back now. Then we make a stand. His voice was steady. "We fight. And if we die together." Lyra's gaze softened. She could see the resolution in his eyes. In that moment, Jake wasn't just a soldier. He was the person who had become her last hope. And she wasn't ready to let go of that yet. Light ahead brightened, but the Vekari ships loomed closer, their shadow darkening the tunnel behind them. Time was running out. Jake's heart pounded as he took one last step toward the exit. Lira by his side. This was it. The final choice had been made. They would stand together or fall together. And Jake was ready to fight, no matter the cost.